All right, Survivor Indianapolis subscribers, fans, friends, family. It's time for me to rant about Survivor a little bit more. I'm not going to talk, I don't think. I always say that, and then I end up talking more than I intend to. I'm not going to talk a ton about the last two episodes. I think that I was nervous about the direction of the game, and it swung back in the other direction a little bit. So we'll see. I just after 48, and given how serious, not serious, but this is season 50. This is a big deal. I don't want, um, no offense to any fans of Gabler or to Gabler himself. He seems like an incredible person. I don't want a Gabler. I don't want an unsatisfying winner or a winner where it's like they played, like yeah, not Cameroon, not is it Caramoan? I'm trying to remember now. South Pacific is the season I'm thinking of. Not South Pacific. Imagine South Pacific if like Coach wins or if Brandon Hance wins. It just is gonna feel unsatisfying and icky for different reasons. And this season, I love Coach. I think he's an entertaining player, but when you try to bring morality into Survivor, um, and morality in a specific way, not just like, yeah, we all agree this is right or wrong, except for this one person who's just like acting crazy. Like that's different. But when it's like very divisive and very much like, I don't, like that's not good morality in Survivor. This is a game. This is a game where, you know, keeping information private. And, even if you want to play loyal and have some level of integrity of like I'm not gonna lie, that's fine. But you can stay silent, and that can be manipulative by not giving information. That can be deceitful by not saying something when you know something. So like you're still kind of playing the game and you're still kind of being a part of the manipulation. So it becomes very difficult to say, oh, this person played such a moral game and they're so honorable. Like it just becomes very subjective and very much like, oh, well, in coach's mind, this is honorable, but this is not. In my mind, maybe I disagree. And maybe lots of other people disagree, including some of the players, including other fans, including some, former players. And it just becomes messy and it just becomes very difficult to be like, how do you progress in a way that is going to lead to a satisfying conclusion in this season, especially when you start to get a little bit political with some of it. There are commonalities politically between some of the people in the Honor and Integrity Alliance. Not all of the people, maybe, but like a lot of them. And when you see some of the actions of some of the people, specifically Coach, and again, like I love Coach. If you stay around for the fantasy side of things, I drafted Coach. I thought Coach coming into this season could be really, really fun and could win the game based off of preseason interviews, based off of things he had said over the last couple of years, just in different interviews and different podcasts and things. I was like, okay, I think he might be finally getting it. In episode one, we see like a coach that is willing to play the game a little bit. And sure, he is still keeping himself from fully just going crazy with no holds barred, no honor, no integrity, just like doing crazy stuff like what Russell Hantz might have done. He's not doing that, but he's not the same old coach. And then the last 2 or 3 episodes, it's been like, oh, well, there he is. He's back. And I was like, like, I don't know. That's just not as fun to me and not as entertaining and not as interesting, especially after 48, where like the entire season seems to be weighed down by this, like, oh, you can't tell a lie. Oh, you can't have friends outside of the alliance. So you can't like do any of this stuff for yourself. It has to all be for the alliance and all be for the team. It's just not entertaining to me. It's not fun. It's not interesting for me. And then you add in the political element, as I said, which is hard not to notice if you're looking for it. And if you know some of the behind the scenes stuff, which if you don't, that's great. And if you don't really care, that's fine. But when you've got a conversation happening in the fan base and in the players as they're being voted off, especially the women questioning the size of the edit of some of the players that got voted off. And that's, to be fair, there's some guys that got voted off, one or two, that didn't have a great edit either. But there was clearly a consistent issue, as I've said before in these episodes. of women getting fewer confessionals than men pretty consistently. Um, Not all the women, not all the women against all the men, but it was happening more than it was not happening. And then you compare that up with some of Coach's actions just seem a little like sketchy when it comes to gender issues. Very clearly, like has his Four Horsemen alliance and he loses Colby. So instead of going and bringing in Chrissy, who he's been working with this whole time, clearly really wants to work with based off what we saw with this episode, instead of going to her and bringing her in, he goes to Rizzo, who he knows nothing about, hasn't worked with him at all, and in fact, in Exit Press was telling people that he wanted him out first. He like slipped a note in Colby's bag, like vote off Rizzo first. And basically, Stephanie and Colby like changed their mind on Rizzo and convinced Coach to like try to like work with him. That's part of why he brought him in. But also, it's like you didn't have to bring him in. You could have just worked with him. So why did you bring him in and not Chrissy? Like why are you so hesitant when you have this confrontation last week of Dee and Jonathan? And in my eyes, yes, Jonathan, has historically been a pretty loyal player, but so has Dee. She's not been void of manipulation or void of deceit in some way, but she's an incredibly loyal player. Just because she won doesn't mean she's not a loyal player. Um, she wanted to bring Julie and Austin to the end. She probably would have lost a couple. She probably still would have won, but she lost a couple of votes if she had Julie there instead of who was the third? Austin and Dee. I don't remember who the third was. Oh, was it Jake? I think it was Jake O'Kane. So she probably would have lost a vote or two to Julie. Maybe even two or three. I don't know. I don't know. You never know. But that's because she was loyal. And so you have these two people, Jonathan, who's just saying like, she's lying, she's lying, she's lying, and Dee's like, have I told little white lies to people? Sure, but I've been loyal to you. I've voted with you. And I'm like admitting to like I'm opening up and admitting to what I'm done. When Jonathan is not like opening up at all. He's just pointing the finger at me. And like to me, that would maybe, yeah, sure, maybe that makes you a little skeptical of Dee, but just to fully trust Jonathan off of nothing really, other than that he's a big strong dude that you think is loyal and you look up to him 'cause he's a big strong man. And do you think she's sketchy because she's a woman? Like I don't know. Just if it was one of these things, and those are just two of the things. There's more. There's more, but it's just one of those things in isolation. I maybe wouldn't think a whole lot of it. But when you hear rumblings that there is some political connection between some of the people, there's 1000% Jonathan, Stephanie, Chrissy. Um, I feel like I'm missing Colby. Um, and then the coach has come out and said that um, he doesn't believe that MAGA is a part of their alliance, that he voted for himself for president in 2024, which is not helpful, but whatever, it's so on brand. But the other people are very openly Republican, MAGA, Trump, everything else. And so it's just like, okay, if that's what you want this to be about, then getting on a Zoom meeting, a Zoom call with your other Republican friends that align with you in some way and that clearly are okay with like Stephanie, um, getting on social media and yelling hateful things at Eliza Orlins because of it, who's also a Survivor alum, because of political issues and coming across pretty anti-Semitic towards a former Survivor alum. Like you guys should be like, if being in this brotherhood and this connection of survivorism and survivor, players isn't enough for you to set aside politics and just be like, you know what, I'm gonna give her grace, give her benefit of the doubt, whatever. And then like you're just gonna go on social media and yell at people, and I don't know. So it's just I was worried. I was worried that it was gonna be this honor integrity thing was gonna take over the season and be a problem, and it wasn't. I will say I didn't hate this twist as much as I thought I was going to. Because if you're Chrissy and you want to whine and complain, which not that she hasn't done any exit interviews that I've seen. Coach did, but she hasn't, and I don't know if that means she's busy or if it means she's like being a sore loser and not wanting to do them. I don't know. But if you're Chrissy and you're like, oh, coach, he lost me the game, whatever, whatever. If they wanted to keep her in the game bad enough, they would have been willing to keep coach, to keep her. In fact, the only people that we saw arguing for coach or Chrissy in terms of like, well, I don't want to vote the two of them out because I want to keep her or I want to keep him. That was only argued by a couple of people talking about specifically coach. Now, I'm not, we don't see all the footage. So were there people out there that were like, you know what, Chrissy's my ally. I want to keep Chrissy. Probably, but the arguments we saw were more for keeping coach. And so either way, the point is, if there were enough people that felt strongly about keeping Chrissy, they would have kept Chrissy, right? Like it wasn't like people really wanted to keep Rick and Emily that bad. I think that Christian probably really wants to keep both of them, probably, but especially probably Rick. Ozzy wants to keep Emily probably. Suri probably feels good about Emily and Christian. Like there's a couple of people in there, but Ozzy probably could go either way because yeah, he likes Emily. But he could be not voting out Emily. He's voting out, oh, it was Aubrey. Even it was Rick and Aubrey, not Rick and Emily. So it's even easier. Like no one really is going to bat for Aubrey except for Tiffany, and even she was willing to vote off Rick and Aubrey if it meant getting herself into an alliance. So, I think that Christian and Suri and Emily want to keep Rick, but like that's that's only a few people. So it was really more about the chaos, I think, of Coach and the difficulty of working with him. You need to see it. There was something that last week, but there also was the moment this week of Tiffany where he's trying to say that it wasn't his fault that she got votes. And then she was like, well, whose fault is it then? And he couldn't even come up with a lie. He couldn't even say, I can't tell you that. He couldn't even say that. He just says nothing for like 60 seconds. And it's just like, okay, like you're just not a good ally. You can't even like if you can't even just say I can't tell you that. That's not lying. Like, is it deceitful? Yes. Is it wrong? Yes. But like, you're going to her with the intention of lying to her. You are lying to her. You said to her, it wasn't me. So you are telling a lie, Mr. Honest, Honor and Integrity. You are bold face lying in her face, which again is a part of Survivor. But you voted off D for doing that. So it's just like this is why it's just not interesting, it's frustrating, and it's not fun when we play Survivor, where the end all be all is someone's subjective level of honor, integrity, morals, whatever word and phrase you want to use. I think that like those things can have their place in the right context. And when it's a group dynamic and not a small subset of the group, but generally it's not fun anyways. It's like if you're just gonna do that, that's gonna work for like one or two people. The winner, and I don't know. That's pretty much it, the winner. But you maybe don't know who's gonna win at that moment. But it's not something that I find to be entertaining. And speaking of that, Jeff this week saying that this twist was courtesy of the fans, and it is genius to be able to craft a vote and then basically do whatever you want with the season if you're production and say, oh, the fans voted for this. Like, how are we ever going to know? So far, nothing that's happened have I voted for. Nothing. I voted to give them rice. I voted to give them food. I voted to not have them do this fight for supplies. I voted for like a lower level of advantages. I voted for a low level of twists. I voted against everything that we're seeing. And maybe I'm in the minority. That's definitely possible. But I do know that like the podcast community of like the people that are like pretty hardcore Survivor fans that are into listening to podcasts weekly, that are into playing games like my game and other people that make these LRG games, people that are into doing the Fantasy Survivor, all that stuff, like those people, they not all of them, but they do seem to skew more towards let the players play the game. Let the game be have the game be out of not in the way of the players, but like behind the players, like propelling the players, and not so much like cutting off the players and like stifling gameplay. And so generally, we don't. I don't really care if they're like. Can you tell they're starving? Like, can you tell they're not eating rice every day? I can't. Like, there's not gonna be enough time in the edit to show that. So why does it even matter? Give them food. Like, what? Who cares? You know, if we were playing a 39-day game and you had like a 20 episode season and you could spend time with these players and do one vote out every episode instead of doing trying to do two or three or whatever. You just if you do stuff like that and slow the game down and extend the season, then sure, maybe not eating might be interesting and entertaining. But if they're not going to do those things, then it doesn't even matter. Um, it's the same as is true of some of these twists. It's like some of them are just random chaos. Like the one this week, I think actually is fine, and I think that like if Chrissy had played a better game, she'd still be in the game. If Coach had played a better game, he'd still be in the game. I don't think this twist is why they got voted off. Now Genevieve found two idols, had to send them both away, then gets swap screwed and doesn't have access to either one of those idols because she had to give them away and is gone because of a twist. Not just a swap, like a twist that was an extra layer to the swap. And so these twists, could she have played her way out of it? Maybe, probably. But like it went from her being kind of on the top to her being on the bottom, and these things all worked against her all at once. And so I could argue that the twists and all this gameplay just took out a good player that could have been really entertaining for no reason. I mean, other than just speeding the game up. So I don't know. At this point, I'm just rambling. So I'm going to go ahead and stop and get into the fantasy stuff. If you're not here for the fantasy stuff, if you're just here to see my thoughts on the episode, I'm going to move on and I'll see you next week. But let's get into our fantasy survivor group and we'll start with first place. So I think that there's a way for me to do like a, oh, is it side by side? What is it? Hmm, I don't know. But okay, I think this is how I like it. I don't know. I hope it's working with me. Um, 'Cause I'm not seeing it the way that I think that everybody else is, but it's fine. Hopefully you're seeing it the way that I am. Okay. Let me see. Okay. Fantasy updates. So, um, let's start with the players for a little bit. So, we've got Coach and Chrissy out 12th and 13th place. And Chrissy actually, while she's 13th, she was still behind D in points and only a couple ahead of Genevieve, which is pretty crazy. Genevieve was 16th and Chrissy was 13th. And there's only 2 points between the two of them. So good on Genevieve there. Um, Emily still stayed pretty low. Jonathan dropped a couple spots. Cerise stayed about where she was at, even though she had a pretty good week because Tiffany had a huge week and Joe had a huge week. And so because of that, even though Cerise had a very good week, she actually didn't gain. I don't think any spots because I think that Christy was below her. Um, she may have gained one spot because I know Jonathan fell, but I know Tiffany passed her. And Joe, I don't think Joe passed her. I think Joe was just already ahead of her and jumped even more. No, Joe must have passed her because Joe had a pretty big week. So Tiffany and Joe both getting an, a immunity and reward combo, 10 extra points. It's pretty huge. So, um, yeah, Rick's staying in the top five with Aubrey, Rizzo, Christian, and Ozzy. Nothing really changed much for these five, I don't think. Other than Coach was somewhere around this range and he fell down. He would be, right here in this sixth spot with 78 points. So we'll see. Wouldn't shock me if Emily, Jonathan, if one of them go out. Maybe even Stephanie, depending on if she gets only two or three confessionals and stays at or below 78 points. She'd have to get Stephanie would have to get three confessionals or less and get basically nothing else for points. Jonathan, if he got, if Jonathan or Emily get voted off, there's a good chance they're less than 78 points. So, Coach, still a pretty good season for him so far. Probably will end up in that like a 10 or 11 spot overall. Right now, obviously, he would be tied with Tiffany and Joe for what, sixth? And a three-way tie for sixth, which means, 6, 7, 8 in that range. I think he'll probably end up 10 or 11. So we'll see. But yeah, good stuff overall. And let's get into the players. So 10th place for us is Brooke. Had a obviously tough week when you only have Suri, but Suri had a great week, her biggest week of the season. So she's, in last place, but did about as good as you could hope with only having one player. Next is Alyssa. Alyssa had 24 points this week. Pretty good week, given that you only have two players, but still in ninth place. Ben had a rough week, 13 points, worst week for a player this week. Um, and he is at eighth place with 341. And he's in a weird spot now with only having Christian left. He's in a pretty tough spot. Probably no shot to win, probably, because I still have Christian and Stacy still has Christian, and Stacy obviously is a good bit higher than him. So these bottom three here are in a really tough spot. Next we have Alex, who is a good bit ahead, and he is in seventh, but he wasn't seventh this week in scoring. He actually was fifth in scoring this week with 36 points because Tiffany had a monster week. And Alex is in a tough spot because he lost Coach and Chrissy. Now, if Tiffany wins and Jonathan's also in the final three, that combination of Jonathan and Tiffany could get him closer. I do have Tiffany and someone else does as well. And I'm not sure who has Jonathan. I don't think Stacy does, but I think maybe Mason does, who also is up there. Noah and Cameron, one of them might have Jonathan. So he's in a pretty tough spot as well. Probably can't win as well. And then sixth is Cameron, who is almost 58 points higher. So a big jump. Only had 30 points this week. Had a lower week. Lost Chrissy, and then had three people that didn't do anything crazy. 10 is fine, but like you had Sari with 16, you had Tiffany with 20, and you're gonna see Joe here in a minute with 21. Those are our top three players for the week, I'm pretty sure. So not having any of those and losing a player is pretty tough. Um, Not that I think that Noah Cameron's absolutely totally out of it, but probably is. You have to have a weird situation where like where are you gonna get to the end with these three? Like Stephanie and Ozzy are working together and are kind of off and on. Ozzy and Rick are kind of working together off and on. So it's like, I don't know. But like Ozzy's clearly in with Rizzo and Suri. Rick is more in with like Emily and Aubrey and Christian, and Stephanie's more in with like Jonathan. So they're in different groups. So probably difficult for him to come back and get into this game. Fifth place is going to be Noah, who had a pretty good week. 34 points, fewer than Alex. Not a great week scoring wise, but didn't lose anybody, and is still in fifth place, and only 1 point behind fourth place. I do think he probably will stay in that 5 or 6 spot next week because the person in fourth place is on a heater, and I think they're going to keep it up. So, but not a bad week for Noah at 444. At 445, we have Ellie, who had the second biggest week of the second biggest episode of the week, second biggest score of the week, 66 points, 445. I do think she probably catches me in the next 2 weeks. Didn't lose a player, so still has 5 players. Had Tiffany and Joe, like just a fantastic episode for Ellie. I am third here with 52 points, 14 points lower than Ellie. I was fourth in points this week with 52. I had a good lead, so I'm still in the lead, but I am clearly in third place. And I think, and unless Ellie, Ellie loses a player or two um, next week or two, and if I can keep my players, we do have some crossover, right? I have Emily, she has Emily. We both have Ozzy and Tiffany. Yeah, so I need like Joe or Rizzo to go out and need to keep all my players for me to stay ahead of her, I think, because she has 5 players and I only have 4, and I just lost 2. So my points per episode are going to probably drop next week unless my other players really step up. So not a great week for me, even though I was able to kind of hang tight and kind of keep things going for now. I think next week I'm going to see a drop in points. And then the opposite of dropping points, the number one player for the week, Mason, 73 points. Huge episode. loses no one after losing D last week, and has two of the top three players, kind of like Ellie did. And I think Rick is actually fourth with 10 points. I could be wrong, but I think maybe someone has 11. I think someone had 11, but I can't find it now. No, I think Rick is fourth and with 10 points. Yeah, Rick is fourth with 10 points. Okay. So, you know, has three of the top four players for a week. That's pretty good. And you didn't lose anybody, and you already had six people. That's pretty good. And so he is not only in second, he's actually not even in second. He's tied for first with 521. Stacy also is at 521. If you want to check my math, guys, it's 60. It's, you can add up all these numbers. And if you get something different than 521, let me know. You're gonna add up these numbers, and if you get something different than 521, let me know. Same with Stacy here. Pretty sure my math's right, but Stacey had the third best episode, but was still 15 points less than Mason. Mason just crushed this week. Had the number one player in Joe and had the number four player in Rick, but you know, Mason had that extra player with Suri. And so, and she only has five right now. Didn't lose anybody, so still a really good week. Still has a chance of maintaining first place next week. If Mason has a lower week some reason, if Christian or Aubrey or Riz, I guess Rizzo is on Mason's team too. But if someone that Stacy has wins immunity that Mason does not have, that could be enough to keep Stacy in first place next week. But it's gonna be a fight. The two of them, they are 23 points ahead of me, and they are like 56 points ahead of Ellie, and then 60 or 50, no, yeah, 57 points ahead of Noah. So, and then 67 points ahead of Cameron. So those are the people that are like really in contention. Um, that I feel like not that nobody else could possibly. I guess they could win, but with us sharing players, it becomes more difficult because then you have to think about, if you only have two or three players left, you have to get your players to the end, but then also some of the people that are ahead of you have those players as well. So, but yeah, it's coming down to it. The top six are all in less than 100 points. Cameron's like 89 points away, I think, is in sixth place, something like that. 70, yeah, 89 points. So, the top three is pretty close. I think Ellie's going to rise her way into that pretty soon. So those the four of us, Mason, Stacy, Ellie, and myself, I think are the people that have the best shot at winning. But Noah and Cameron are not that far back. It wouldn't shock me if one of them, went on a little bit of a run here at the end. So we'll have to wait and see. But other than that, I think that I'm good to head out of here. Thanks for listening to my rambling or skipping ahead to see the fantasy update. Either way, I'll see you guys next week.